Hi, welcome back. Happy Sunday to you. Attorney Steve Vondran here. We are talking in this video about class action lawsuits. Okay, everybody's heard about the class action lawsuit. Some people like them, some people hate them. We're going to talk about them in a general overview, the nuts and bolts, kind of more than the average person knows kind of thing. So without further ado, let's get on into it here. All right, so this is general legal information only and not legal advice. We are talking about the class action lawsuit. This is all about a lawsuit that's filed by a representative on behalf of a large number of people, okay? So this is what we call the strength of power in numbers, okay? The power in numbers. So the more people you have, and usually this arises, you have something, let's just take an example. You have some sort of consumer fraud. Let's say it has to deal with a car dealership or something, and everybody was defrauded somehow, or there was unfair, misleading representation, what we call consumer class action, consumer law. And, you know, it has affected, you know, tens of thousands of people on up to, you know, 500,000 people or more. I'll give you an example. My wife, there was a problem with the car that she bought. She got a notice in the mail that says, hey, you're part of a class action. So that's usually how they go. But let's talk about it a little bit more. Essentially, I'll go through the elements in a second, but let's start with just kind of the most common types of class actions that you see. Number one is that, like I said, that consumer fraud, the consumer class action. False and misleading advertisements, defective products, you know, lemon law stuff that affects a lot of people, or violation of some consumer protection laws, okay? So that is probably the most common everybody hears about, consumer class action. So that's what they're talking about. You also have employment law. You know, here's one of the stats I read, and, you know, you take it with a grain of salt and do your own research. But I read somewhere in California, one of the states that I'm licensed in, they talked about almost half or a little over half of the lawsuits actually being employment related. So you new bar graduates, you're going, well, what area of law do I get in? Well, employment law is huge. Think about it. There's something, 35, 40 million people. How many people are employees? So that's a lot of different employment types of class action. You can have unpaid wages, minimum wage issues. You can have things involved, you know, you were not getting paid your vacation time or getting the proper leave, those kinds of things. Another popular thing is misclassification of independent contractors. This was an issue that popped up in real estate law, where a lot of real estate agents, you know, everybody assumes that they're independent contractors, namely because they sign a contract that says you're an independent contractor. But misclassification of them, if they happen to be, if you control the duties of the work and they happen to be employees, then you may not have been paying them properly. So just paying commissions may not have been good enough. And there was a couple cases in California, I didn't track them to conclusion, but it dealt with misclassification of independent contractors. That's another type of employment case, could be a class action. You have a real estate firm with 1,000 agents, you know, now you're talking class action. You could have different things, missed meals and breaks, not getting your breaks and meals, and employment discrimination, you know, race, age, gender, those kinds of things. Securities frauds, another one, investors who lose money due to false statements of a stockbroker or investment bank. Environmental catastrophes, I would call them, toxic torts, things where you have oil spills and water contamination or toxic chemicals released by a local factory, things that may go downstream or affect property owners and people and health, all kinds of things like that. So that can be another form of class action where there's a lot of people injured. Antitrust, this is another one that's essentially like price fixing, you know, where consumers go, well, you know, we ended up paying more for this product because the three big giants in the industry, you know who they are in every industry, they're getting together with what we learned in law school, a wink and a nod at a cocktail party going, yeah, wink and a nod, yeah, we know what's going on, let's get those prices up there a little bit. Then we all do better. So that's another possibility. Antitrust. Other possibilities for class actions, privacy and data breaches, anything that's dealing with personal information, putting your personal information at risk, and privacy being like the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Didn't we have the big data breach against, was it Equifax, I believe? Don't quote me. No, but I think it was Equifax, one of the big three credit bureaus. There's three credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, in case you didn't know. But if you have a data breach and it's affecting, thousands, if not millions of people, you could see a class action in that area. Civil rights is another one. And here's a newcomer in town. It's an old comer, but it's a new twist on an old comer. Americans with Disabilities Acts. Now, this is designed to provide, people with disabilities essentially access to the marketplace and give them, the ability to function in daily life like everybody else gets to. So, but the new one is the flavor of the day, I would call it, is website accessibility. So we're hearing more and more about these. This is where a website is not your company website, let's say, is not properly accessible to those with handicaps, vision problems, or hearing problems, those kinds of things. So this is affecting companies that have retail stores and a website, and there's no telling how far this is going to be stretched. This could be, over the years, every website has to become what we call ADA compliant. So that could be a whole new area for new young attorneys looking for that new niche practice area. And Attorney Steve giving you the ideas here, as always. So, but those are some of your popular categories for class actions. Now let's talk about, and by the way, a fun fact, this is Attorney Steve fun fact. Do you know what year the first class action was used? Anyone? Bueller? Voodoo? No. First used in 1909, according to the Webster's Law Dictionary, 1909. So this has been around. Over. I guess that's over 100 years, isn't it? So the class action's been around a while. In California, the code section is CCP, stands for California Code of Civil Procedure. Section 382 is going to give you all the nitty-gritty details. But we're going to talk today about the federal rule, Federal Rule 23, FRCP, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 23, class actions in federal court. Now, they're going to be fairly similar, but I'm going over the FRCP version, okay? So if you're going to bring a claim in federal court, of course, you're going to follow the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, and that's Rule 23. Now, this is essentially a class action. Once again, it's a lawsuit filed on behalf of a group of people that are all similarly situated. Similarly situated is the key here, okay? That's kind of like for your law students, that's your equal protection test, similarly situated, popping up here. So you're basically filing a lawsuit. One law firm and a representative plaintiff will file a class action lawsuit and seek to get it certified by the federal court judge. And certify means that, okay, you've met the four elements. I'm going to certify this as a class action, and then everybody in the class gets notice, and they can either opt out or not. But let's look at the four elements. In order to get this, your complaint certified as a class action lawsuit in federal court, you need to show, I'm going to give them to you real quick, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, numerosity. 2, commonality. 3, typicality. 4, adequate representation. So for you bar students, when you're on the bar exam, they're talking about a potential class action. A big oil manufacturer spilled, the whole city was contaminated. You're going to talk about these four elements: numerosity, commonality, typicality, and adequate representation. So let's look at these in a little bit closer detail. Number 1, numerosity. This just means that you got to have a lot of people. You got to have enough people that it just doesn't make sense to bring in, say 10,000 people were subject to defective tires and wasting their money on defective tires on a car. you're not going to have all those people and all their attorneys fill up a courtroom and come in for a case management conference. I mean, that's just out of control. It makes no sense. So you need to show the plaintiff, the class representative, bears the burden of proof on these 4 issues. They must convince the judge that a class action is superior. It's the superior way to bring the case because, judge, you don't want everybody suing individually. It's all the same questions of law and fact. It's the same defendant. It's the same circumstances and events. I mean, it just makes no sense to have 10,000 or 100,000 different lawsuits being filed. It's what we call judicial economy. It's a great one for you law students to get in your exam. Get it in there, judicial economy. And you don't want to, and again, that's the problem of multiple actions across different jurisdictions and all over the place, the same case. So it's an efficient way to resolve disputes where you have numerous people having the same problem. So that's numerosity. Number 2, commonality. This just means there's a common question of law and fact, single issue common to all members. So you need to show that there's something in here. Maybe it's a product defect. Maybe it's false advertising, common to all members. In copyright claims, maybe it's musicians that haven't been paid a royalty by some online music company. So commonality, that's very simple. Typicality, it's very similar, related. Claims and defenses of class members are typical. So they arise from the same event or practice of the defendant. So again, common questions, typical claims and defenses. And 4, finally, adequate representation. What does that mean? That means you need to have qualified counsel. There needs to be some guarantee that if it's 500,000 people in a class action, that this firm is going to be competent and able to vigorously represent all parties. And that's a lot. That's asking for a lot because let's say you have 500,000 people. The phones could be ringing. You need to be able to handle the calls and inquiries, and you need to perform your lawyer-like duties, as they say. Speaking of duties, you need to make sure on a conflict of interest level, if you have 1 million consumers in a class, you need to make sure there's no conflicts of interest. The rules still apply, the ethical rules, the rules of professional responsibility, okay? So that's important to hit that. So you want to make sure that they're adequately protected, that their interests are protected, everyone can be represented. If all those 4 elements are proven, if the judge can certify it as a class action. If not, everybody is on their own. Pursue your own case if you want to. Most people don't even know they have a case until they get that letter in the mail. So once the certification is made, all members are basically part of the class. And so what happens is they all end up getting notice. If it's 200,000 people, it's going to be 200,000 notices going out. And those are the things you get in the mail. And you may get those and say, well, what do I do with this? This is it says I'm in a lawsuit or I'm a plaintiff, a defendant. I don't even know what's going on. If you're not sure and you got a notice, give us a call. We're happy to take a look at it, see what the action is, according to time, assuming we have the time. But we're happy to, as time permits, to take a look and see what that is. But essentially, you get the notice, and you do have opt-out rights. So you may say, you know what? I'm glad somebody brought that up. I've suffered, $50,000 in damages for this. I just never really got around to doing anything about it. But now I see, and you go on the internet all the time and you see people saying, if anyone wants to start a class action, let me know. Well, sometimes, you find out through these notices. So, those are the kinds of things. And then the case is litigated. Many of these cases are settled. Some people, the judge approves a settlement, the attorneys get their money. Some people criticize this saying, well, it's token payments. I'm only getting token payments. But, my wife, I think on one of her cars that she bought, I want to say she got $1,000 or $1,500, and it was something she was never going to bring on her own. So, it was, you put that in the cash that check and, put it to use. So at any rate, so, that's a general overview of the class action process. In the copyright context, we have different cases. Just to give you 3 quick examples, and we're going to cut this video short here, if it's not too late for that. Spotify was in a royalty dispute with about 500 or so potential class members, 500,000 that is. So a whole lot of musicians claiming they weren't paid their royalty. There was another lawsuit with the TCPA, and this was TCPA is the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, TCPA, and this prevents those robocalls, those annoying, robocalls, and text messages. And there was a case dealing with Rights Corp, who was calling all these people who may have illegally downloaded music online and doing the robocalls. And I think there was about 2,000 potential class members there. Google Music was in a lawsuit over unpaid royalties. And the TCPA is interesting. Well, I'll close this video with that. The TCPA is real interesting because, like I said, it's basically the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, and it outlaws certain things, and 2 of the main being those robocalls. But it outlaws some of the following. I'm just going to give you the quick outline of what it prohibits, because this is a real cause of action. We get this. I get these all the time. I just don't, I don't start up the class action on it, but somebody could. But using an automated dialing machine to place the call, that's the robocalls. You can't do that. Calling consumers who ask the company not to, if you opted out. This happens all the time, right? A little tip for you, legal tip, Attorney Steve legal tip, is, when you get these calls from these companies, trying to solicit business, if you don't want to be on the call, you say, please put me on your do not call list. Please put me on your do not call list. That's all you have to do. Write it down on a piece of paper, who called, what time, who it was, and what you told them. And if they call back, that's a violation of the law. So that's a violation. Calling consumers on the National Do Not Call Registry, that's DNC, that's what we call it. What else? Sending unsolicited advertising faxes. This used to be really big. I know most of you kids nowadays, you probably don't even know what a fax machine really is anymore. But it used to be people would send you these faxes, and it would be kind of that rolled up little plastic paper, and that stuff was expensive, and everything cost money. So sending that was causing damages in the problem of it was taking your time, your cartridges, your paper, your printing, all that. So that's prohibited. Calls to residents, here's another interesting one. Calls placed to residences before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. So that's another one, like I said, here's one is you just keep a little log next to your phone, not a big deal. And instead of getting all excited and huffy-puffy and angry when these people call, just say, can I get your name? Who's this? What company are you calling on behalf of? Do you know I'm on the Do Not Call registry? This kind of thing. Do you know you're calling me at 7:45 in the morning? Do you know you're calling me at 9:15 at night? Take a note of those, and you just say, hey, if you've got an issue, give us a call and say somebody continues to violate this. Call us up. We're happy to take a look at it, okay? Another one, failing to identify the person or entity on whose behalf the call is being made. That's what I just said. Ask them who they are. If they say, none of your business, is your dad home? That's, take notes and don't let them get away with that. The chances are if you deal with a company like that, they're not reputable anyway. And that's really part of what this law is designed to protect. And finally, using an artificial voice or recorded messages. So, those are some of the things, but again, this is where you have, people may have that may be a tiny injury. You may go, well, that's just, it's a little inconvenience. It's something that everybody has to live with. Or you call a class action attorney, you say, hey, what do I have here? This doesn't seem right. I know it's against the law, and maybe we can put a class together and, represent your interests, okay? So that's Attorney Steve Vondran, General Legal Information Overview, Class Action Lawsuits. So now know more than the average bear will ever know about class action lawsuits. They won't tell you this on TV. They won't go through these elements and give you all these examples. But when you hear the word class action from now on, I want you to think about this video and say, AttorneySteve.com gave me the information that I needed. Thanks a lot for listening. If you enjoyed this, give me the thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe and join. What do we got? We're pushing to about 10,000 subscribers now, so keep us going. If you have any comments, we usually only like the nice comments instead of the angry ones. But feel free to leave us comments. We're happy to listen to them anyway. Freedom of speech, right? I got to run. Have a great day. We'll talk again.